Many organizations say, we want more of our employees to be involved in thought leadership. But how do you turn thought leadership into a program that's for more than just the top of the house? Today, I talk with Dan Sanchez. He's Director of Audience Growth at Sweetfish Media, a company that produces podcasts for B2B brands. And they've deployed an amazing evangelist program. I'm Bill Sherman. This is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Ready? Let's begin. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
I want to dive in right away with you on a topic that I think a lot of people in organizations struggle with. How do you get people within your organization to talk about your ideas and your content and get it out into the world? And one of the things I think you've done is you've been actively working on an evangelist program for LinkedIn. So maybe you can set the table with that, and then we can go into some detail on it.
Sure. So if the audience hasn't been bumping into us on LinkedIn at Sweetfish Media, we're a podcast agency, but you wouldn't know that on first glance based on all the content we post. And we do post about content, but if you're connected with any of us, any of the employees that are especially active in our LinkedIn evangelist program, you're probably seeing us a lot from that one person or a lot from the rest of us, because we're engaging so much in LinkedIn that you're going to be bumping into Sweetfish employees all over the place. And it's not just about things that related to what we do as a podcast agency. They're building their own personal brands. They're growing their influence as individuals, as people, as their own entities beyond us. But of course, it's been wildly successful for Sweetfish as a brand in itself. It's become one of our top producing channels for our company, probably by 3 times any other channel. Of course, we have multiple channels, but it's 3x the next biggest channel as far as producing revenue in the last 2 quarters. So we've been doing well with LinkedIn and getting organic reach. None of this is paid. It's just getting, I think in the last year, we've produced a few million views in our content, and we're producing a lot of it, and it's getting out there and doing its thing. It's being seen by a lot of people and getting a lot of traction.
Well, and I want to lean in on something that you said, which I think is critical. You talked about individuals building their personal brand. A lot of organizations say, okay, we've got an approved piece from marketing or from comms. It's gone through legal, and that's the only things that can go out and be shared. We'll share it on a corporate LinkedIn page, and then we'll ask people to like it or share it themselves. You're taking a different approach. Talk about the approach that you're taking at Sweetfish for building LinkedIn profiles and presence among your team.
I always kind of cringe a little bit when somebody tells me they have a LinkedIn advocacy program, especially if they use the word advocacy, because there's a certain level of software that kind of helps automate that process, and it forces your LinkedIn employees to automatically engage with your company.
You turn them into bots,
or to publish, you push publish, and then bam, it gets shared by 50 employees. I'm like, ugh, that's gross, and that's not what social is for. Social media is there for you to actually be social. Right. So instead of just taking the company profile and trying to push that, and you can do that and you could do it well. Instead, we're working through people, but they're real people. They have their own interests. They have their own topics that they like to talk about, their own passions that aren't even related to the work that they do. So you have to make it about them, and you actually have to get them interested in posting and creating content themselves. And that's no easy task. And that's usually one of the things that people ask me, how do you get your employees to actually post themselves? And I'll tell you, it's really trying to figure out why would they post for them, not just for your company, but how do you get them to post for them? And we didn't spearhead it just by launching it and being like, go post for you. Yeah, do your thing. We started with just the leadership team. And even across the leadership team, James was already really heavy in it. Logan was there too. And then I was kind of like the third wheel that started with nothing.
Well, 12, 18 months ago, you basically started going, what do I do with this platform, right?
I was new to Sweetfish's team, and James kind of showed me the ropes. He's like, this is how you do LinkedIn. And I had done well in a lot of other marketing channels. And I was like, okay, I get it. I understand now. And so I just went and executed his plan and learned from other people like Justin Welsh and Chris Walker. They had some good insights too. And then I just actually executed the plan. I actually posted every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I was really active, engaging in tons of other people's profiles. Of course, I tried to optimize mine in a way that I felt like not was just trying to present myself in the best light, but was actually the most considerate. Like, what can I possibly write on my profile that people would actually care about in a way that's helpful to them? Right. So it's actually
Mhm.
trying to be the most helpful person out there. And when you take that kind of approach, naturally your influence grows.
Well, and
So
I want to stop you there. You talk about something on being helpful, and I know that, that could be sort of taken as a soundbite, but I've seen over the last 18 months that you've been posting that you are relentlessly generous. And I'll say this on your behalf in that you'll say, "Hey, here's something that I've created that I've been using. Here's a tool that I'm working on." You are proactively putting out things. And I know I've taken notes from you and saying, "Oh, that's a good technique," or "That's a good software tool that I didn't know." I'm constantly cribbing and getting value from you, right? Because you're working visibly through issues on LinkedIn. There's a transparency and authenticity involved on what you're doing.
I find that it's best to just be just don't pretend like you know everything, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's better just to come out and be like, "Hey guys, I'm trying to figure things out." And then when you have something you figured out, share it. Like, you're trying to actually be helpful, but also humble. In fact, I put together like, I think even a year ago, I put together like 3 core values. Like, what do I want my content to come across as? Like, how do I want to be known? And helpfulness was one, humbleness was the other, and optimistic was the third. So everything I do on LinkedIn ties back to those 3 things. I want to be as helpful as possible. Like, and that's usually as much as I try to be as helpful with the one post, it's actually just showing up and trying to be as helpful as possible with one individual at a time.
Hmm.
Somebody asks a good question in a comment, I write a really long response or a personal video. I try to give them the exact answer that I'm hoping that I would hope to get. And then humble, like I actually ask lots of questions. I don't pretend to know everything. I don't. The more it's like the classic, the more you learn you don't know. So I'm
Hmm.
asking questions all the time. Just an hour ago, I asked for help with HubSpot, and a
Yep.
bunch of people have already shown up, and they're like, "Hey, actually, Dan, we've been talking for a long time. HubSpot's my thing." I'm like, "Great." I'm gonna probably post a meeting with that guy because we have a relationship, and now I'm gonna get. I've been helping him a lot. I'm looking forward to getting some help back, right? So being humble, asking questions, being ready for critiques and criticism. I invite criticism in as long as they're actually like they actually care about you. If they're just being mean for being mean's sake, then I block them like everybody else does. But
Hmm.
a lot of people are very quick to poke at things that you might believe. And that's actually good because sometimes we have things wrong. We have to be able to change. And then optimistic. Like, I'm trying to share things in a way and be as helpful as possible so that, the future looks better. The future looks brighter, inspire some kind of hope. I'm still digging into that third one. I think I got the first two down, but trying to inspire more optimism and hope is what I'm trying to go for. So that's what I've
So
been doing with my content.
and I want to explore your journey first, and then we'll go back to the Evangelist program. Okay. When you started out, and I know this is true for a lot of people who are just starting to post on LinkedIn and create that content, they have one of two issues that come up. Either they feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, where they say, "Oh, why should I be speaking? I'm not really an expert on this. There's so many people who know more." Or they have content insecurity and they say, "I haven't figured everything out yet, so I'm not going to say anything." Did you encounter either of those or not? What was your experience finding your voice?
I have before in the past, and I think because I've wrestled with it with other platforms that I hadn't achieved success on. I can't say LinkedIn is probably the first organic social channel that I've actually done well in. And I think there's a few reasons for that. LinkedIn has some major advantages over other social platforms. Like, I'd made a vlog, I'd done YouTube, I'd done Facebook posting, I'd done Instagram, I have a blog. It's not a huge blog, but it's got dozens of blog posts. It ranks for keywords, it gets traffic. So like, I'd put myself out there and tried before. For those people who are listening that feel like they have nothing to say, everybody has something to say from the very beginning. And if you position yourself as a student, as someone who's hungry and humble and just wanting to learn and grow, you always have somebody to help. At first, it's just asking lots of good questions and just posting your journey along, and people will watch you go from zero to start to like learn and grow. And if they watch you kind of like learn in the process, they'll start to know that you know what you're talking about, or what I call
You
learning in
do
the light. Yeah.
you get people who cheer on your growth, right?
Yep. It happens all the time, especially like I've done a few deep dives into topics that I didn't pretend to know anything about this
Hmm.
year. Account-based marketing, thought leadership was one too. Account-based marketing, I really didn't know anything about. I'd read like one book. I'd read Sangram's one book on account-based
Hmm.
marketing this year. Did a 30-day deep dive, and my intro for every single episode was like, "Hey, I'm just a B2C marketer coming into B2B. I got a lot to learn. So I'm talking to the people, I'm reading the books, and I'm just going to take you with me on my journey as I make this transition and learn about this very important strategic marketing category." And I didn't pretend to know. And that's what made it so much fun, is because I could take the guest on the show and be like, they're the experts. And I could ask them maybe even basic questions. But a lot of the audience was joining me in that effort. And they would text me and like message me afterwards, be like, hey, I actually wondered that too, because there's always more people at the beginning, which is why everybody has something to offer. There's always somebody. It's like a triangle, right? Or I'm in the video, I'm like holding my fingers up like a triangle. There's always more people at the base of the pyramid than there are experts at the top. And you might only be a few steps up that pyramid in knowledge. But remember, there's 3 times as many people trying to take that first step. So if you could just be helpful to the person just a few steps behind you, that's all it has to take. And sure, it might be regurgitating something else that you've learned from someone. And so give that person credit and say, like, this was actually helpful. That's a unique take, to take something that maybe you read in the 4-hour work week that was helpful and be like, hey, I tried this thing from Tim Ferriss and gosh dang it, it worked. This is what I did. And this is how I tweaked it myself. And it actually worked. That's going to be helpful to somebody, because you're just sharing what you're learning and giving somebody else a unique angle on it, because everybody's different. So everybody's going to have a unique facet to it that somebody else didn't have before.
So we've talked a little bit about your journey as well on the platform and LinkedIn, and your sort of mindset in approaching how do you show up not only as a personal brand, but also as a voice of Sweetfish, right? So let's talk about the next step. You talked about leadership doing LinkedIn in a group of, what was it, 6 or 7 of you working on it.
Yeah.
When did the idea come up and say, we need to expand this beyond leadership? How did that come about?
We always wanted it to be company wide, but
Mhm.
we were just wanted to kind of get it going with leadership first. And it was good because we essentially modeled what it could be if you went all into this. And I think my story of being able to take a small, I probably had just about 1,000 connections and going to like 10,000 in a 5-month period, showed people like, hey, like you can do it. This does work. And while I don't know, I've been doing marketing for a while and I had a lot to say about these things, but a lot of it wasn't just me even sharing expertise. It was asking good questions. It was getting good conversations going. It was trying to be helpful. It kind of showed that like there was something to be said there, that it was actually a huge career making move and that it was worth trying to emulate. So now and there's momentum here. So when you have a couple of key players that have a little bit of a following on LinkedIn and they're working with you, that helps you build up your credibility pretty quickly, because especially if they're commenting on your posts and the way the algorithm works, it's almost like, if you jumped on a trampoline, have you ever been launched on a trampoline and somebody
Mhm.
larger than you comes and jumps right before you jump and it launches you? That's what it's
Yeah,
like working with somebody with a little bit of a following.
you get the lift, right?
Yeah, you get the
Yeah.
lift. They come and comment. They have a large following. It gets shot out to a lot of their following every time they comment on your post, which helps you get farther just faster. And it's not like it wouldn't have happened before. It just would have taken longer. But with a couple people that have a little bit more influence on LinkedIn, it's like boosting you on a trampoline. It just gets you a little farther faster and gets you a little bit more exposure. So
So
that's helpful too.
as you reach out and you said, okay, we're going to take this out to other employees, we've figured it out enough that, we're ready to give them that little bit of boost. How are you opening it up? Are you inviting people? Are you recruiting people? Are you just saying, hey, it's here if you want it? Let's talk about that process of how people are getting into this program.
I think first we just started off by celebrating, because it was a team effort just to do the leadership team to get the results that we got with just
Mhm.
the 3 or 4 of us really going at it. It's probably like three of us and then a few that were posting every once in a while, but it's really James Logan and I really hitting it hard. And then, of course, we're not writing all the content. Like we literally have a full-time employee that helps us write. She writes about a third of my content and maybe like half of Logan's, and James takes some of her content every once in a while. So he's particular. But that helps a ton knowing that I don't have to write all the content. Now she's taking my ideas and just repurposing it into LinkedIn content. So it's not like she's writing things that I wouldn't say. They're all things that I would say generally. So celebrating that team, showing the results of my journey and sharing that with the team at large and being like, look, we want to open this up to you. So kind of rolling it out, like we're going to put together a program. If any of you are interested, we want to help you build your personal brand. Yes, we imagine that you'll talk about Sweetfish too, but I'm going to have no requirements for you to talk about podcasting. I'm going to have no requirements for you to talk about Sweetfish. If you do, fantastic. Though we do ask for one thing,
which is
we do ask for their byline. And that is one thing that's strategic. I might change it in the future, but right now it's working. And that is a very strategic small phrase that follows. It's always under your name, whether it's on your profile or in the comments. It's we produce podcasts for B2B brands. It's a very short phrase. It comes first on your bio. That way, it's almost like a miniature ad following everybody around through every comment, every post. They kind of know what this person's about. They work for an agency that specializes in producing podcasts for B2B brands. And that's it. That's like the main requirement. I produce training based on what I learned. So we give that to them. And that's actually available to even anybody for free. Any listeners want that.
And we'll get to that in a few minutes. Yeah. But so step one, someone says, yeah, I'm interested in this. Do you say, good luck, go post and we'll comment on yourself or on your stuff? Or is there a process that you do to help people prepare?
At first, it was a little loosey-goosey and it was too loose and people were like, wait, how do I do this? And we'd kind of have some meetings, but I did formalize a program with an official onboarding sequence. I decided to make it, they have to commit to a quarter at a time. Okay. And the major commitment is they have to write 3 posts a week themselves, because if they don't write, while we're writing content for them, they still have to have some skin in the game, right?
And you'll write
if you're not writing your own content. Yeah, we're writing content for them, but in order for us to even get a feel of like how they write, what their topic is about, what they're passionate about, they have to throw something out there for our writers to even go off of. And if they're writing themselves, they're just going to be more committed to it, which means they'll be out there engaging in the comments, engaging with other people's posts. Versus if we only wrote content for them and they weren't engaging with the platform, then that content just wouldn't get seen. So we'd be spending time and employee time on something that just never wasn't being seen by people.
If you are enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about the podcast, please leave a 5-star review and share it with your friends. We are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all major platforms, as well as at leveragingthoughtleadership.com. Well, and I want to call something out here because you said you'll have people writing for them. It's not just on podcasting. You'll have your writers, if I understand correctly, write on whatever topic they've chosen, right, for their personal brand.
Yep. And oftentimes, because they're going to pick something somewhat related to what they do, it's going to be beneficial for Sweetfish. Like they're going to talk about customer experience. Well, of course, they're going to talk about Sweetfish. They're actively involved in a customer experience role. But I have one guy who actually found us through LinkedIn because of my posts. And then he was great. We hired him. He had his own podcast going on recruiting. His podcast is called Recruiting Hell. It's a fun podcast on like
great topic.
How hard it is to get interviewed and go through the whole recruitment process. But that's less, even though it's a podcast, it's less related to what we do. And it's not our target audience, yet we're backing his personal brand. That is his thing that he wants to talk about. So we write content related to that, related to recruiting, related to finding jobs, related to all the things that come with job hunting, right? So we actually, our one writer is writing that kind of content for him.
Well, and you're working from the assumption that if they're working for your company as a podcasting company, it's likely that they'll speak to things that are related and good for the business, right? Just like if you were an engineering firm or a manufacturing firm, same sort of thing. So my question would be, if someone said raised their hand and said, I want to do this, but they don't have a personal brand or they don't have a sense of a personal brand, how are you helping them develop it? Or do you just say, go start talking about podcasting until you find something else to talk about?
We actually do meet with them and start to develop their personal brand early on, and it is a process, and we're still working on this process. We only launched it like officially a month ago, and we've only started walking through the process. We're in like the first month where we're in the first quarter, right? We launched second quarter, so we're only like a few weeks into it. Though they started early. They have to start posting themselves a month before the first quarter starts, and then they're committed for the quarter. And they could pause it or re-engage in the next quarter. But I'd ask them to commit to one quarter at a time, since it can be exhausting to try to keep up with LinkedIn sometimes. Want to give people a chance to rest and take a break if they need to. But we do meet with them, and our social media specialist actually has a one-on-one with them first to just say like, hey, like what kind of topics do you think you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about something related to your work? Do you have a personal project you're extremely passionate about? And they just start taking inventory of things that they're good at, things that they're passionate about, things that are related to their job here, and then just trying to lay out the table to see like what things we can look at, maybe even pair together as good topics. For example, one of our evangelists, Angela, was very interested in talking about career progression, but she was interested in starting her own podcast. And I was like, why don't you blend the two and just talk about the personal, call your show the personal podcaster. Talk about how to advance your career with a podcast. It was a topic that I was like wanting to do, but I was like, you take this topic because it kind of blends everything together. She also wanted to talk a lot about empathy. But as a podcaster, empathy is one of those key skills of learning how to listen, learning how to help your guests navigate through the topic. There's a lot of empathy involved in podcasting and marketing. So I kind of pitched that idea to her, and she's taken it now. She's producing her own podcast and talking about it on LinkedIn. And so that was one case within the Evangelist program. Everybody's kind of found their own thing. And of course, where you start isn't necessarily where you end. Your personal brand is an evolving journey, and it kind of takes a while to find it. Even myself, I still have ideas of where I want to go because I'm still known as a marketing generalist because I'm ADD and can't help myself digging into so many different marketing topics. But even then, I like it to be more focused on a particular thing. And I think I have some ideas for that in the future.
Well, and there's this interesting intersection between the personal brand and its relationship to the individual, and then the platform for thought leadership puts the idea onto stage and shines the spotlight on the idea. And so one of the things that I've heard from organizations that said, yeah, we want everybody to be involved in thought leadership for the organization, but we don't want them to build their brand so large that if they up and leave, we lose our following. Did you guys have that fear at all, or how have you thought about that?
I've definitely had that fear for Sweetfish for myself. Especially as my personal brand started picking up momentum, I'm like, if I left, like, would James hate me? Who's the founder of Sweetfish? I actually have had conversations about this with James, and James is like, he's like, I want to become known as the company that launches people like you if you were to leave. He's
Well,
like,
and
that's only going to come back around. And so that's the mentality I've had. I'm like, it's true. If you start to become known as the influencer launch shop, then one, that says a lot about the company. And if you treat people well and help them find out where they want to go, and maybe that's not at Sweetfish, and you help them get there, like that is going to build goodwill that's going to come back eventually. I don't know how it's going to come back, but it's going to come back. If you're launching all these employees into awesome places, that's going to work out for Sweetfish in the long run, even though it might sting in the short term. Also, if you're doing it with your whole company, then you have a diversity of personal brands that kind of protects it from just one person leaving. At this point, James and Logan and I still have the strongest pull, but over the course of the next year and a half, I'm expecting, it's always the 80-20%. So out of our 14 evangelists, probably 2 or 3 of them will amass like a more influence than others. Right. And that will help balance things out as some of them will get more hungry and just get more engaged in it and just work it. And that'll just create safety. So we don't have to worry about, oh, if this one person leaves, we're gonna lose a ton of traction. We will lose some, but it's not something that keeps me awake at night for sure.
And what I hear in your answer is an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset, right?
Yes.
Because the scarcity mindset would look at that and say, oh my gosh, we can only talk about our officially approved message. We can't let people go off message. We're certainly not going to support people and give them writing help to talk about things they want to that aren't related to our brand. And, we're afraid that if they walk away, we invested in them. But what causes people to stay? Investing in them, right? And who do other people listen to? People who they trust and respect, right? So if you want to, I think, make an organizational focus on thought leadership, and not everybody's a writer, right? Some people are terrified of writing. Maybe they like talking or speaking or podcasting. Supporting them and doing what you guys are doing, I think, is absolutely essential.
It's working out so far. I can't wait to like take the whole team that we're doing now and then have like a more fuller case study. We're actually going to be doing probably a live training on this sometime in September, because enough people have been coming to me and asking me questions about how to get this started in their own companies. So far, the data is looking really good. I see new leads coming in all the time, and the source is LinkedIn, and then still coming from our podcast too. But LinkedIn is the one where people are hearing about us first.
Well, and there's this blend, which is really interesting, of helping individual employees build their professional networks and making them more influential serves the goals of the organization, either directly or indirectly. And I think we went through a phase of decades where it was like, well, people are replaceable, right? And we can get someone else to do that job. Now, because of the ability of an individual to build a following, that turns it on its head.
The goal of Sweetfish Media, at least our mission, you could say our purpose statement, is to foster meaningful relationships. We usually do that through podcasting. So we think a podcast is a great way to get to know kind of anybody you'd like to know, whether they're ideal buyers or ideal partners, maybe new employees or people you just would like to build friendships with. It's one of the best ways to get people and have FaceTime with them, kind of like we are here now. But LinkedIn is also a fantastic way to find those people and keep the relationship going in between podcast episodes, in between Zoom calls. So this evangelist program is really just an extension of that purpose of the company, to foster meaningful relationships, not just with them and other people through their personal brand, but also between them and Sweetfish. We know if we can endear them by giving them, like, this is a benefit that I haven't heard of anybody else offering yet. I'm sure it'll be a thing in the future, trying to actually write content for them and help them build their own personal brand. But it's another way to kind of give back to our employees, of which we have lots of things we're trying to do that. But I'd say this is one of the more unique ones.
Well, we're in the summer of 2021, and one of the phrases that's been bandied about is the great resignation, of people looking, going, okay, the way work worked before the pandemic versus now, I'm looking for something else. And part of that process of moving is, what are you doing to invest in me? Why should I spend my time and effort for your organization's goals? And this sounds like you're trying to find a way to say, hey, we're on a journey together.
It's attractive. I mean, it's kept me around, and I've had a few people take runs at me trying to get me to go work for them, offering me more money. And I'm like, no, because I have to weigh, like, Sweetfish over the next couple of years. I have to weigh, like, okay, like the opportunity cost. Okay, yes, I get a little bit more money in the short term, but what am I missing out on the long term because of how much more influential my personal brand might become, hopefully in a good way, in an authentic way that is only done through helping lots of people. But I have to weigh that, and it makes it a lot harder to consider going anywhere else. That's for sure.
So we've talked about your journey as an individual. We've talked about the journey that you're starting with the Evangelist program for others. And you mentioned that you've done something very generous as an organization in making the program available to others. You want to talk a little bit about that and say if someone's interested in trying to figure it out for them, where can they go and where can they see what you guys are doing at Sweetfish?
Yep. So I recorded a 3 video training series that I actually now use to teach all of our evangelists how to do well on LinkedIn. And it's different from other LinkedIn training videos because it's literally through the perspective of how to grow your personal brand and your own personal profile, not your company. It's not how to promote your company, it has nothing to do with your company. It's how to grow your own personal influence on LinkedIn. And it's just all the stuff that I learned from James, from a few other people on LinkedIn, things that I tried, things that worked, and then I put together in a video series. I released that after I hit like this 10K marker, and it's been 10 months since then. And almost everything in those videos are still true today. While you can find it on my LinkedIn profile, you can also find it at sweetfishmedia.com/10K. And that's the number 10 and then the letter K.
Fantastic. So as we begin to wrap up here, you are in an interesting position, right? Where you're seeing the podcasting world, you're seeing people building not only individual personal brands, but organizations build brands. And a lot of the listeners here are responsible for getting ideas out on behalf of their organization. Is there any advice that you would offer tied to podcasting? Since I know that's your lane, we haven't talked a lot about that. Anything that you would offer to someone who would be thinking about podcasting for an organization, either things to do right or things to avoid?
One thing I want to say about getting ideas out is I actually am getting ideas out through the Evangelist program. I will take things like maybe a customer case study, have the writer that's writing a lot of the content break it up into small pieces, and then post it for the employees. But they have to approve it. So I am sprinkling out content about Sweetfish out there. And some of it's kind of like, hey, like more like press release stuff. But instead of writing a press release and putting it on PR Newswire, we're just sharing it on LinkedIn through our employees' profile. So that is working to get information out there. When it comes to podcasting, of course, we're a podcast agency, so we're going to be biased
Of
on
course.
this, but we're biased for a reason. We just James really discovered this on accident and discovered how good it was. Is that the best way to do B2B marketing, especially if you have a pretty large contract size where account-based marketing is kind of like that's in your realm, like that starts to make sense to spend focused marketing time on individual accounts. The best way to engage those accounts that we've found is through a podcast, because you don't want to just send them gifts. You want to build relationships with them. And one of the best ways to build relationships with people is to make a podcast, not on your expertise, but on the expertise of your ideal buyers. So if you're a lawyer that sells to creative agencies, it's not going to be a podcast about law. It's actually going to be a podcast about how to run a marketing agency. And then you're going to invite your ideal buyers. If you sell maybe trademark services to them or whatever, you invite them to come and talk about how they do what they do, their secrets, what they're doing to grow, what they're doing to expand on their innovations or whatever. You invite them to talk about their expertise on this podcast. By doing so, not only are you creating great content that attracts the kind of people you want to have an audience of, you actually get to build a relationship with one guest at a time, because you can have a few email exchanges, but getting on a Zoom call like this and having a pre-interview and then one like this for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe 50 minutes, it's very different. You're at a different level in their relationship schema now, just by being able to talk to them and promote their expertise, promote what they're doing with their company, and then publishing it for the world to see. And you could call that somewhat manipulative, though we hold it very open-handed. It's not like we go from there to then pitching them on our services. No, we're using it strategically to build relationships, knowing that a lot of those relationships will turn to revenue. Some of them won't. Some of them aren't ready for it, but I guarantee you they're going to check out your website and figure out what you're about while they're being a guest, while they're following up with the episode later. They're going to find out what you offer and why you offer it. And we've had a lot of people like even leave the companies they were at start a new company and they'd be like, call us right away. And they're like, oh, I've been waiting to start a podcast ever since that interview. But my last company wasn't interested, but this one is. And then they're going to call the ones they know. They're going to call the people they trust. And because they have a relationship with you, because they know you, they've talked to you, they're going to come calling you.
So, Dan, there's a whole lot more we could talk about. And I know you and I, when we get together to talk, it could go an hour, hour and a half easy. But I think we're going to have to leave it here for today. If someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they find you?
LinkedIn, just like we were talking about. You can find me at danchez.com/LinkedIn.
Awesome.
And it'll just forward you to my profile.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Bill.
If you're interested in organizational thought leadership, then I invite you to subscribe to the OrgTL newsletter. Each month, we talk about the people who create, curate, and deploy thought leadership on behalf of their organizations. Go to the website orgtl.com and choose Join Our Newsletter. I'll leave a link to the website as well as my LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing what you thought of the show.